Thank you. And Linda, take it away.
Linda, you're muted.
Linda, you're muted.
So I'm going to be sharing my screen, Lisa. I hope that I have permission to do so. I think you might need to give me that.
Hold on a second while I do that.
Okay, sure. While Lisa's doing that, I just want to mention that I'm actually using two screens. So you may see me sort of looking back and forth between my two screens, so you'll know what I'm doing. And I'm going to monitor as much as I can the chat and the participant list to see if folks are raising their hands. I really like it when it's interactive, so I hope that there'll be lots of comments and questions. This is a really interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you about it.
Linda, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, terrific. Let's see how this is. Okay. All right, so I'm hoping that you're seeing my PowerPoint. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Okay, this is good because I actually usually have an issue with sharing PowerPoints and being able to see everyone, but I figured out how to address that. So I was hoping it was going to work. So as Lisa said, I'm going to be talking about, oh, but I should say, let me see if I can do this. Lisa, I don't actually see, let me see if I can. I'm not seeing the chat box anymore, and I don't see a way for me to see that. So I might ask Lisa if you would just monitor that, and please feel free to interrupt me. I think we have about a dozen folks, so that won't be a problem at all to do that.
Yes, I can monitor that. That's fine.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And just let me know. So Lisa asked me to speak about wide area assistive listening systems. And there are really three areas that I wanted to cover today. You would have read this in the abstract, and that's currently available systems like hearing loops, FM, infrared, and Wi-Fi systems, which are a relatively new entrant. So we're going to go over those. Then we're going to talk a bit about advantages and disadvantages of those systems. Generally, those systems get compared and contrasted with one another. I actually think the way we should think about this is, what do people need? And are these systems meeting those needs? And so that's how I'm going to address that. And then I know a lot of people are really interested in the new Bluetooth technology that is being discussed a lot, called Auracast. It's a capability that's enabled by Bluetooth low energy technology. And I know there was just a presentation on Tuesday about that. And I wondered if any of you were able to attend that or saw that presentation. It looks maybe like not. That's fine. I just was curious if there were any folks who had seen it. We'll be talking about some of the same things because that information is basic and new to most people. So we're going to be covering Auracast as well. All right, so the very first thing is really, why do we even need some sort of wide area assistive listening system. And I probably don't really need to tell you this because you experience it all the time. But really the issue is that when the sound source, the thing you really want to listen to, is distant from you, it means that that sound is going to be harder for your hearing aids to pick up. And in fact, it's harder for ears to pick up as well, as the sound is more distant, even if it's coming through a PA system, for example, above you. So one of the reasons that hearing aids might not be enough in certain situations, particularly like auditorium situations, is that the thing you want to listen to is just distant from you. The other thing that can happen is that there can be noise in the environment, and that noise can come from all kinds of sources. But what that means essentially is that the signal, the sound you want to hear, is lower. The noise that you don't want to hear can be higher, and that can cause a real problem, and that's called reduced signal to noise ratio. The other thing that happens in larger settings, larger rooms, is you can have reverberation, and sound in those rooms can bounce off of hard surfaces. And when that happens, it can actually blur, if you will, the sound that you hear. So we have issues around the sound you want to hear maybe not being loud enough. There may be noise in the environment. And finally, you might experience reverberation from that sound bouncing off the surfaces, particularly in a large space. So all of those things are reasons why hearing aids aren't enough, and we need to look to some other assistive technology to help in those situations. And the truth is, you know, we've talked about hearing aids sometimes being not enough, but regardless of your hearing status and your hearing device use, eventually everyone needs hearing assistance, and that's normal. So I'll be in venues where all of those things affect me too. The sound I'm hearing that I want to hear isn't loud enough, the noise is too loud, and I'm getting reverberation. So this isn't just a problem that people with hearing loss and hearing devices experience. They just happen to experience to a greater degree than others. So everyone sometimes needs some sort of hearing assistance, and that's absolutely common and typical. So we already mentioned that there are a number of assistive listening systems, and there's been some research to look at their effectiveness. And they're effective in a number of ways. So they are very important for people to utilize. They provide a number of benefits that are proven. Some of those include things like being able to understand speech in the presence of noise better. Having the perception that communication is easier. Having greater satisfaction in listening, and reduced listening effort. So there's a lot of information, a lot of research out there that tells us that these systems are important to have in place, and in fact provide a whole variety of benefits for people who can use them. So what I thought I'd do is sort of talk about these systems at a very basic level. I actually see Judy smiling, and I know why she's smiling, because she's seen this picture before. But it turns out to be a pretty nice way of describing every single assistive listening system out there for wide area. And that is that it talks about three key elements of the system. The first one is that you have to capture the sound that you want to hear. Somehow, some way, you need to capture that sound. That sound then needs to be carried to the person who wants to hear it. And that person then needs to couple or connect to that sound, have a way of receiving that sound. So this is just a nice way to think about it. It was coined actually by an audiologist who I used to work with, Cindy Compton, the idea of catch, carry, couple. So these concepts are true for every single assistive listening system out there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next. I do want to say that in the picture, you can see that there's a wire, right? There, we are going to be talking about systems that are wireless. So in our case, the carrying of that sound happens without any wires for every single system that we're going to be utilizing or discussing. So just a reminder that we're talking about catch, carry, and couple, but these are the 3 stages of every system. If we look at catch in particular, that capturing of the sound is done typically through a microphone at a live event. So a presenter may have a lapel mic on, they may hold a handheld mic, but that microphone is close to their mouth and close to the speech that we're interested in. So that is how the sound is being captured. Another possibility, if you have some recorded material, is you actually plug in the system. You have an electrical connection directly to the sound that you want to listen to. Now, the thing that differs among all of these systems is that middle section, and that is how the sound is transmitted wirelessly. In every case, there's always something that transmits or sends the sound out, and there's always something that must be on the other side to receive that. And that receiver is what's worn by the person who's listening. So when we go to a few of the next slides, we're going to focus on the transmission methods. That's one of the key differences. It also, in many ways, dictates advantages and disadvantages of those systems. The third area is how that sound then couples or connects either to the ear, just the naked ear, if you will, or the hearing device that somebody might be wearing. Generally, those forms of coupling are fairly universal. We'll go through each of those mechanisms, but these 3 components are important. We're going to focus on the transmission method, and we're going to focus on the coupling to the ear hearing device, because those things can differ. The catch or capture of sound is pretty much universally the same for every system that is out there. So I said we were going to talk about wireless transmission methods. I have a feeling that many of you have experienced these systems. So we're going to start with hearing loop systems. I would say if you've been to a convention, you've obviously at least had access to a hearing loop system. So I'm just curious if people, maybe you can raise your hand if you've actually utilized a hearing loop. Okay, I have one person saying no. But if you've had that experience, they're fairly common. So Wendy raised her hand, and we'll talk a little bit about how that transmission is different from all these others. There's another type of system, the frequency modulation system. It's much more commonly known as an FM system.
Linda,
Mm-hmm.
Linda, Wendy has her hand raised.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Wendy.
Sorry, I did put in the chat. I love your slides. I'm wondering if we can if I can get a copy of them, or do I have to email you for that?
Yeah, if you would email me, that would be terrific.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So FM systems are another common system that you will find out there. A related system is something called a digital modulation system. And in fact, you might even hear these referred to as FM systems also. That's because they both use radio frequency to transmit information, whereas the hearing loop uses magnetic signals to transmit that audio. We move on to the next system, which is infrared. So I don't know if you're aware of this. Infrared is part of the light spectrum, and it actually relies on light for the transmission of sound. A new entrant, I suppose, over the last 5 or more years is Wi-Fi systems. I think we're probably all really familiar with Wi-Fi. Most of us have Wi-Fi in our homes or connect to Wi-Fi at hotels or, in public locations. But now it's being used specifically to transmit sound. And interestingly enough, Wi-Fi systems are not quite as what I refer to as siloed, meaning they're not necessarily thought of as assistive listening systems for people with hearing loss, but you'll see them being advertised for other things as well. Like if you go to a bar, and most of the time the TVs are turned off because there will be multiples of those, but maybe you really want to listen to what's on a particular TV. And you can, if a Wi-Fi system is implemented in that space, then you can actually tune in and listen to that TV through a Wi-Fi system. So that's completely separate from an assistive listening system, but it just demonstrates how this concept of assistive listening is broadening, not just to people with hearing loss, but really to everyone. And finally, now we're moving on to a different way or method of transmitting sound. This system is well known to all of us. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't used something that has Bluetooth technology. Bluetooth technology has not traditionally been something that you could use for broadcasting audio because there's this very specific pairing of the transmitter and the receiver together. So, for example, anyone who might be using made for iPhone hearing aids knows that you pair your hearing aid with your iPhone in order to listen. So you have to have that pairing. You may be able to pair with multiple devices, but really when you're listening from one device to one device. So it's a one-to-one kind of situation. Broadcast audio is quite different. You have the sound source broadcasting to any and every receiver that's out there. But there have been some changes to the Bluetooth technology that we're going to discuss in a little bit that happens in an organization called the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. And that is shortened to SIG, S-I-G, Bluetooth SIG. It is the organization that writes all of the specifications for how Bluetooth is supposed to work. And there have been some very new developments starting in about 2020 with new specifications that will allow Bluetooth now, well, in the near future when we have devices out there that permit it, but will allow the Bluetooth technology to be utilized as an assistive listening system. So we're going to talk more about that. But these are the main categories of transmission methods It distinguishes one system from another, magnetic coupling with the hearing loop. We have frequency modulation or FM systems, and digital modulation is another group. Infrared uses light to transmit sound. The Wi-Fi systems use Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth uses Bluetooth. So because they're all different methods of transmitting things, they are not what we call interoperable. So you cannot use an FM receiver with an infrared system. The FM receiver would not be able to receive the audio from the infrared system. So they're not interoperable. And interoperability is really sort of a linchpin for accessibility. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about the importance of interoperability when we get to the Bluetooth systems and why that provides such promise. Of course, nothing's been deployed yet, so we don't know how it's going to work in the end, but it's one of the reasons why there's a lot of excitement about the idea of being able to use this new Bluetooth technology for assistive listening. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the ways that the receivers connect to hearing devices. So this is how, as a person who's wearing a hearing device, how you're going to receive the sound that's been transmitted using this assistive listening system. I think most people in this group are very likely to be familiar with telecoils. Maybe you have a telecoil in your hearing aid. I'm guessing you probably all do. But telecoils pick up magnetic signals, and they then convert that signal into sound for you through the hearing aid. Telecoils are generally inside of the hearing aid, but if you happen not to have a telecoil in your hearing aid, and you want to use, for example, that loop system that transmits magnetic information, you can get a separate accessory that has a telecoil built in there in order to make use of that. So the telecoil, though, is probably one of the most important built-in technologies in hearing aids that has been really important for all kinds of access to assistive listening systems and to telephone, because it's built in. You carry it with you. You carry the receiver with you in your hearing aid. You don't need a separate receiver like you do with an FM system. So it's really been something that obviously people advocate for and find great value in. So we're going to move on to headsets or earphones. It's just another way. For example, if you have a separate receiver like an FM receiver, you can connect with headsets. So you can listen over a headset or earbuds, because all of those receivers have an audio jack. So you can plug in your headphones or receive a set of headphones if that's how you might like to listen in a public venue. So headsets or earphones, many people can wear those over their hearing aids or their cochlear implant. So that's another method of getting that sound from the receiver into the hearing aid. I'm guessing people have utilized neck loops. So this is another device that can plug directly into the receiver and then sit around the neck, and the telecoil picks up the signal from the neck loop and transmits it to the hearing aid. There's also, in this case for cochlear implant users, the possibility of direct audio input. So you can plug into that receiver and actually plug directly into your cochlear implant for listening, it's another option. Sometimes people actually have a boot on their hearing aid for FM systems. I mentioned the intermediary streamer that people can wear. For example, if you don't have a telecoil in your hearing aid, but you want to pick up a loop signal, there are streamers that have telecoils in them. And then finally, built-in radio frequency receivers. The idea is here is really what we'll have with Bluetooth technology, that in effect, there will be a receiver, much like a telecoil is currently, but a receiver for that Bluetooth signal that's built directly into the hearing aid. I think people who have made for iPhone hearing aids already experience this because there is literally an antenna receiving the Bluetooth signal from the phone. But now this would be receiving a Bluetooth signal for a broadcast for assistive listening. So there are lots of different coupling methods. They're utilized, many of these are utilized by all of the systems that we're talking about, but they require different things or couple in different ways, actually to the hearing aid.
Linda, Wendy has a question.
Yes, sure. Go ahead, Wendy. Should I go back?
Hi, Wendy's here. I put in a note about infrared system in the chat, and you can go back to it later. But I have a whole bunch of other questions to ask, and I'll ask at the end of your presentation. But right now, I was just curious about the infrared system, so we can discuss that when you're done with the presentation. Thank you.
Sure. So what I have here are 4 assistive listening systems. These are pictures of 4 different systems. They look pretty similar, don't they? But they all have different transmission methods. Remember, I said that's probably the key difference between the various assistive listening systems. So if we look at that first system in the upper left-hand corner of the PowerPoint, anyone have any idea what kind of a system that is? Remember, we have loop, we have FM, infrared, and Wi-Fi. Wendy, do you have an idea?
Yes, I believe this is an FM system from William Sound. The Catholic Church that I used to go to was using this one. I actually went in there and complained that the neck loop wasn't strong enough. It got to the point that I had to hold the neck loop next to my cochlear implant to hear anything, and they finally got new neck loops.
Okay,
so that one I'm very familiar with.
All right. So Wendy's absolutely right. This is an FM or digital modulation system. Sometimes that's used interchangeably. But what you can see, and I want to ask, and Lisa, can you confirm, can you at all see my cursor?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, no.
No?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so okay, terrific, thank you. What I'm circling here is the receiver. Actually, 2 different receivers for this FM system. And this is the transmitter. There's an antenna, and this antenna is actually the thing that's sending out the signal that the receiver picks up. These are neck loops. And as I mentioned, receivers always have an audio jack plug so that you can plug in a neck loop, or I had mentioned previously, headphones to the receiver. So you don't actually, if you go to a venue and you get assistive listening, you're not going to see the transmitter. What you're going to get is a receiver like this and a neck loop or headset. And hopefully there will be signage available so that you can identify locations that actually have an assistive listening system available to you. But you can see that these components are all the same. We're going to look at these other components, but they have transmitters and receivers, and they all differ based on how they transmit that sound from this transmitter to the receiver. I'm going to move on to the picture in the upper right-hand corner.
Linda, I think you froze. Can you hear me? We may have lost Linda. Let's hang in for a couple more minutes here to see if she comes back. I think she's going to have to go out and come back in again.
Hey, Lisa, I got disconnected for like a second.
Okay. So
I'm
we
not
don't see your screen anymore.
Right. I'm going to share again.
Okay.
So
There we
hopefully
go.
you're seeing
We
it
can see it.
now. I don't know what happened. It disconnected and then reconnected automatically. But I was talking about the picture in the upper right and saying there's a receiver here, a way to couple. And this is the transmitter. It's actually a copper wire that gets laid around a room or put around the perimeter of an area. And this is a hearing loop system. So now you can see that, again, it has the same components as the FM system, the receiver, a way to couple to the ear, and a mechanism for sending the sound to people. In this case, this receiver has a telecoil in it. If you have a telecoil in your hearing aid, you do not need this receiver. You can just turn on your telecoil and receive the signal from the loop automatically. We're going to move on to the bottom left picture. This is another kind of system. Hopefully you're recognizing that these things are very similar in their components. Again, we have a receiver. We have a way to couple it to the ear or the hearing aid. And we have a way to transmit sound to that receiver. Anyone have any idea what kind of system this is? So this one is identifiable because of this little piece right here. And what that is doing is it is emitting light for the
Sounds like it's an
receiver.
infrared one.
So it is an IR system, exactly. So again, you can see same components, receiver with a coupling method. The transmission method is infrared or via light. But everything looks pretty similar. And now we're down to the last one. So maybe you can guess it just by process of elimination. But once again, we have a receiver. And here we have a method or methods of coupling that receiver to your hearing aid. This is a neck loop, and the other is a headset that you can wear. So anyone want to say what this system is before I reveal it?
It feels like a Wi-Fi, okay,
Well,
because what you got there are routers, right?
exactly, great. So here we have a Wi-Fi router. You might even, this might look familiar because you may have a Wi-Fi router in your home. And so this again is a method for sending that sound to the receiver. So the receiver is sort of like your smartphone, where you can use Wi-Fi to connect your smartphone to a variety of things for different purposes, like reaching the internet. And so it's going to be able to receive Wi-Fi signals and then couple the sound to your ear. So the purpose of looking at this was so that you would get the sense that these systems in some ways are very, very similar. They all have the same components. What differs is how the sound is transmitted through the air, because it's wireless, to the receiver. And that receiver may be like these here, where it's a separate thing that you wear, or in cases where you can pick up a magnetic signal, you're going to use your telecoil. So I'm going to pause there for just a minute and see if there are any questions about that. Because I think what I've been trying to do is make this less complicated. There may be a variety of types of systems, but they all have very similar components. Heidi.
So when you go someplace, what do you have in your purse to make sure that you can connect to a system, or should those place be providing the neck loop or the transmitter?
Yes, so those places should be providing you with the receiver, because you want to receive the sound, and they should be providing you with something like a neck loop, as you see here, or a headset, right? So if you're going and you have something with you, it's going to be the telecoil in your hearing aid.
Okay.
And so if you're in a loop system like this, you don't need that receiver. You can go in, turn your hearing aid on to telecoil, and then pick up the sound that's being transmitted. Heidi?
If you're going to a public event and you know that you can't hear a bloody thing and you want something, how do you, and how long in front of do you have to request help?
Right, so we're kind of getting into public policy, so I do lean on Lisa here. But if, first of all, I make a request as far in advance as you possibly can, I would say, you know, telling them a day in advance isn't going to do much for you. But if you have to register, certainly at the time of registration, to let people know that you need assistive listening. Now, there may be some places that have these things already installed. I think Lisa mentioned earlier on that it's in some cases the people hosting the event's responsibility versus the actual venue. But I would say you can't let them know sort of soon enough that you need something like that, and you should definitely check in with them sort of periodically as the time is approaching that you're going to go to the event, just to make sure that everything is happening smoothly. Any place that has a system, I hope, will have signage in place like these that you see here, okay, that you could make use of. I'm going to move on to the next slide if there aren't any other questions. So as I mentioned, one of the things that I think is important is to think about these systems with respect to what consumers want and need, as opposed to comparing the systems one to another. And so I came up with this list. You can tell me if you think I'm missing anything, or there's something that you would add to it that I don't have here. But this is kind of a long list, so I'm going to go through it a little bit at a time. I think people want high fidelity sound, right? So the signal you really want to listen to, you want it to have good quality and you want it to be well reproduced. You also want that signal to arrive at your ears at the same time you're seeing, for example, the person who's speaking, talking. It's really important that what you see and what you hear are synchronized in time, because if they're not, it makes it much more difficult, if not impossible, to make use of those lip reading cues that you can get from this kind of situation. So something that's low latency, meaning the audio arrives quickly, is really important for that synchronization of the visual signal with what you're hearing. There's not always a visual signal. It might just be an announcement that you're listening to and you can't see anyone. That's latency is less important, but if you're seeing and hearing someone at the same time, then latency is really important. Wi-Fi is a system that has definitely had issues with latency. There are certain systems that are companies that are addressing that more than others. One of the issues is that if you want to pick up a Wi-Fi signal, it's never going to go straight to your hearing aid. Your hearing aid cannot pick up Wi-Fi. It has to go to that auxiliary receiver that you might wear. And then getting it from that receiver up to your ear, somebody might use Bluetooth, especially if it's their phone that's picking up the Wi-Fi signal and they think, oh, I'll just use Bluetooth from my phone to my hearing aid. What happens is there's more latency that gets added on. You have latency from the Wi-Fi signal, you have latency from Bluetooth, and it can make the latency too long to really use that synchronized audio and video signal for example, speech reading. Everyone wants to have adequate volume and they want to have low interference. If you have a wireless system, every wireless system can be susceptible to interference. And sometimes that interference depends on the venue itself and maybe what kind of materials it's made from, how it's structured physically. So we want low interference, and there are ways to address interference, but no system is ever interference-free. But we want to minimize it as much as possible. We'd also like the way the sound gets from the receiver to our hearing aid to be really easy and reliable. We don't want to have to keep reconnecting or having the sound go out. We want that coupling to be quick and easy. It's best when it's built in, and it's even better when whatever is built in interoperates with every system out there. We don't have that yet. The telecoil is probably the closest because you can connect to a neck loop with a receiver, or you can connect to a hearing loop directly. But this piece, this interoperability, is something that we do not have yet, mostly because all of these systems use a different method for transmitting sound. Some places some people need privacy and security for jobs. So if they're in a meeting and they're receiving some sort of secure information, many times companies don't want to use a system where there's the possibility of that information being picked up some other way. Systems like the digital modulation and Wi-Fi can be encrypted and secured. Loops definitely are not private or secure. FM versus digital modulation, not secure. Infrared is often considered private because light does not go through walls. So you can close doors, like in a courtroom, use an infrared system, and nobody outside the courtroom is going to be able to pick up that signal because light cannot go through a wall. Radio frequencies, however, can. So IR is often seen as something that affords some level of privacy and security just because of the way that transmission method light works. People want these things to be widely available, want them well maintained, have a long battery life. You know, there's nothing like getting a device where the batteries or the receivers haven't been charged, or the battery that's in the receiver is low on power. And I think people want something that's easy, familiar, and uniform in use. There are 4 systems already out there, moving among them from one venue to another, because you don't have control over what the venue has put in. You just have to use what is available. But I think having something uniform and familiar across all venues is something that consumers would want. I'm going to pause for a minute and see if I missed any important things that you think people need or want from assistive listening. So Vi said, well maintained is a good point. I have been in several situations where the equipment is faulty, not functioning. Yep.
Yeah, I have that. I've had that happen. Especially, I guess, because this is the place I go to, churches, where
Mhm.
I will say, I just went to one recently in the area, and I know through Lisa that they are supposed to have something in place. I talked to the priest directly, and he said, oh yeah, we have some things. I could look for them, but to be honest, we haven't used them in a couple of years, and I don't even know if they've been, I mean, there wasn't even a concern about it.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's the next step? How do we ensure that if these systems are in place, they're going to be well maintained?
Right. It's a great question. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Wendy?
Hi. So I'm gonna say that there have been times when I've been one of the only person using an assistive listening device in a church service, and I have found out where the batteries are stored, so I could actually change the batteries myself.
Right.
Yeah, while rolling my eyes. But what I'm going to ask you is, you just listed the pros and cons of all 4 existing ones, the Bluetooth, infrared, the FM, and
Well,
and the loop one. So, but my question is, do you have any recommendation on, like you said, infrared was usually recommended for courts? What about churches? Do you say churches should look at specific systems or not?
you know, I think that much like people getting hearing aids, individual venues need to take a look at the options and consider what's going to work best for them. And part of that involves assessing whether or not a particular transmission method will work well in the building that they're in.
Yes.
So I think
Yeah.
that's where you need somebody to consult with. An installer. Installers are not always easy to find, but having that consultation is really important, because you don't want to get in a situation where you install something and then you find out there's something in that building space that can interfere with the transmission method of a particular technology. So I think that there's a consultation that's needed from outside professionals for something like that. And also an understanding of, you know, what are you going to use this system for, how it's going to be used, what kind of, meetings or services that you have, and what's the nature of those. There are a lot of factors to consider, and we're not really going over those at this time. It's sort of a whole separate set of considerations for sure.
All right.
Figuring out how it's going to be used is kind of the first step.
All right. Linda, one last thing to ask before I stop talking is, So it seems like, and I've been pretty excited about Williams Sound's digital hearing hotspot, and I keep wondering how good they are. No, I keep thinking a digital hearing hotspot sounds wonderful because, you know, even people are used to using their mobile devices to hear stuff, and it will be fairly easy. And so it will be fairly easy to get people used to that kind of system. I mean, but you're now telling me the latency could be an issue with hearing hotspots. So
Yeah,
how are manufacturers addressing that?
So I certainly know that at least one manufacturer is addressing it. They don't tell us how they're addressing it. But one thing that is true is they tend to recommend you not use Bluetooth in addition to Wi-Fi. So if you have Wi-Fi picking up the sound on your phone, then you probably want to listen through something that's wired to the phone. Of course, the problem—
And not the actual smartphone you have. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. So the other thing, the other piece that I wanted— oh, did that stop sharing? Are you still seeing my screen?
We're still
Yeah, I'm
seeing
still
your
seeing your
screen.
screen.
Okay, it was just me who stopped seeing it. Okay. The other thing that we have to consider is, what do venues want? Because they're really the people who, in the end, are going to make this purchase or provision. Well, cost is obviously a big factor, and they want something that's cost effective. They want something that's easy to install. Not everything is costs the same amount or has the same installation burden. Loops generally are higher cost, particularly for large installations. And if you're retrofitting a space with a loop, it can be costly because you may have to take up carpet, lay down the loop, put the carpet back over it, those sorts of things. That increases the price. It also increases installation burden on the venue, and it's can not be easy to do. Places want something that's low maintenance. So the idea that someone is bringing their maybe receiver with them is a benefit because there's less maintenance involved. They want it to be reliable so that they know if they give it out to people, if it's a receiver, that it's going to work. And they may very well be interested in security as well. Some of these things, like being cost effective, easy installation, all those things are important. But I think venues also consider wide appeal. And Wendy, I think you were kind of getting at this. If there are other people who find a value in using that system, the more people who want it means it has wider appeal, it's wider usage. It's very likely that that's going to influence maintenance of the system. So all of these things are important because, as Wendy said, or I think Wendy or Vi, someone said, you know, I went someplace and the priest said, yeah, we have something, but nobody asks for it. Nobody uses it. I could maybe find it. Who knows if it's all plugged in. But if things are widely adopted and there's wide appeal, I think that will have an impact on a venue's willingness to actually implement an assistive listening system. And of course, as we know, some places must meet ADA requirements as well. So I think all of these things—
Vi has a question, and we have some questions in the chat as well.
So Lisa, I may pause on those questions. I'm just trying to pay attention to the time. I know people are interested in Bluetooth, and I want to have a chance to get to that. So I'm going to hold the questions in the chat until we finish with the Bluetooth. So some of these issues related to what vendors want, what consumers want, Bluetooth technology has the potential to solve. Whether it will or not is a whole separate question. We don't know. It's not out there yet. It's not been deployed. We don't know if people will love it and use it and adopt it, or they won't. So this is all something that's sort of a promise to some extent of what Bluetooth might be capable of. Will it happen in the end? We don't know. But Bluetooth technology has a level of familiarity that I think probably almost none of the other systems do, including Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is familiar, but its use as assistive listening is not familiar, where Bluetooth is very familiar for listening to audio already. There are a couple of different flavors, if you will, of Bluetooth. There's something called Bluetooth Classic that has been utilized for a long time for listening to audio. And then there's Bluetooth Low Energy. You may have heard these terms used. This particular type of Bluetooth was used just for like remote control of a device, not for listening to audio. But in 2020, a new standard specification came out related to Bluetooth Low Energy, specifically for transmitting audio over this method. So what does LE Audio give us that Bluetooth Classic did not give us, or maybe other methods don't give us? One is that it's a new specification specifically for hearing access. So previously, there hasn't been anything related to Bluetooth technology that's been specific for hearing access. Now you might say, well, there are MFI hearing aids. Apple's done that. Some of you may know about technology that Android phones have provided by Google. But the thing about those is they're proprietary solutions, and they're not able to be used by everyone. So the iPhone might be capable of made for iPhone connections, but if you have a hearing aid that doesn't have that, you're out of luck. You can't use that particular Bluetooth technology. So this is special because LE Audio has something particular for hearing access. The other thing is there have been complaints in the past. Remember I said that one of the needs or wants of consumers is high fidelity audio, something that sounds good. There have been complaints in the past from hearing folks who are using Bluetooth to connect to all kinds of audio devices that the quality hasn't been as good as they would have wanted. Well, the new LE Audio supposedly has better quality than the old Bluetooth audio, classic audio, and it also utilizes less power and it's lower latency. So two of the things we talked about, batteries running out, we want something that has long battery life, and we want something that has low latency. That is supposed to be something that is afforded by LE Audio, so improved audio performance. And this is something that's different as well, increased number of audio streams. So a Bluetooth transmission can actually send out information in different streams. So there can be different streams of information. And if you have an audio stream for left ear and you have an audio stream for right ear, it means that you can listen in stereo. And that's something different. So most of the things like a loop will not afford you the ability to listen in stereo. This will permit that. The other thing this allows is an audio stream, for example, that you might want to listen to if you're actually a Spanish speaker and not an English speaker. So there may be an audio stream that you can sort of dial into, pick up that has Spanish language instead of English language if you happen to prefer Spanish. Let's say you're blind and you need some sort of audio description so you know what's happening, say in a performance or movie. You could pick up an audio stream that includes that audio description to make whatever you're viewing more accessible to you. This hasn't been available with other systems. This independent synchronized audio stream is another thing that's really going to be interesting to see how this evolves and how it's taken up by various people. But you can see how something like this would be very interesting for a lot of people. It has a wider appeal than just having a single audio stream for audio. And then finally, it affords this expanded use. And we've sort of talked about this. I think, Heidi, you mentioned Auracast. That's the branding that has been used to identify broadcast audio that is Bluetooth technology. And one of the important things is, I think we're familiar with Bluetooth, that you pair one thing to another in order for them to communicate. So you pair your hearing aid with your phone so that they can communicate with one another. The broadcast audio does not require pairing. There's no pairing process required. The broadcast is just sending out a signal saying, hey, I'm here. If you want to connect to me, I'm here to connect to. There's no pairing required. The other thing that's true is, remember I said that with Wi-Fi, it's your phone that's picking up the sound because your hearing aid can't pick up that Wi-Fi signal. There's no built-in Wi-Fi receiver. With Auracast and with LE Audio, you may use the phone to help you select what you want to listen to, but the actual sound is going directly from the Bluetooth transmitter to the Bluetooth receiver right in your hearing aid. So there's not this delay or latency latencycy where the sound has to go first to your phone and then to your hearing aid. It will go direct to your hearing aid once you selected what you want to listen to. Okay. So I'm going to skip over this picture because I'm sensitive about the time and the captioning, but I want people to know, how do you know whether your device has these capabilities? Does it have, is it Bluetooth enabled? And if it is, does it also have this ability to hook into Auracast broadcast audio transmissions? So as I mentioned before, I think we're all familiar with the Bluetooth trademark and this mark that you'll see on phones and computers when you're connecting to things. There's also a mark or a signage for Auracast. So you can see that these symbols are quite related to one another, but they are different, so as not to confuse Auracast with Bluetooth, even though Auracast is a Bluetooth technology. So you'll be able to see whether a product has Bluetooth, and then if it has Bluetooth, is it capable of hooking in with an Auracast broadcast? And you can see that on this packaging. In addition, you can see here on this phone that this phone is able to pick up both Auracast and has Bluetooth coupling capability. So that's on your device. Now, what about the location where you're going to? We looked at signage before. So you saw the ear with the sort of line through it for signage for other systems. This is what the Bluetooth special interest group is going to be using for signage. So if you're entering a place, here it is on a door. But if you're entering a place of business or you're in that business, the thing you want to look for is this symbol. And the symbol would indicate that that location has an Auracast broadcast. So there's a broadcast happening that you can actually link to if your device also is Auracast capable. One thing that in addition to that is maybe you don't want to just have to show up and find out whether or not they have this available. The Bluetooth Special Interest Group says that there will be a searchable database. So you can just go online to the website and look for the location that you're interested in going to see whether or not they've installed Auracast. So that's really nice. And finally, big question is, okay, maybe my hearing aids have Auracast capability. Maybe I'm going to a place that has an Auracast broadcast that I can hook into. So how do I join? How do I listen to that broadcast? And there have been a variety of methods for doing that proposed. One is with an assistant. So this assistant most likely will be your smartphone. And it may be that you scan for the broadcast, just like you scan for a Wi-Fi network. You might have like a sort of a place where you just touch your phone to a button, like you do when you're paying using Apple Pay, and you will immediately be connected to the broadcast that's coming up, or you will be connected to the application that shows the list of possible things you can connect to. The other would be scanning a QR code with your phone. All of those methods rely on an assistant. Your hearing aid can't do any scanning in the same way that your smartphone is able to do. And you certainly couldn't scroll through and look at what the possibilities are. But there are potential ways to do this without an assistant, much like your telecoil works. Except in this case, it's a Bluetooth receiver. So the idea would be there is a special broadcast that's sent out that's always going to be capable of hooking up with a hearing aid that has Auracast. And in that situation, it may be the case that you can flip a switch, press a button, do some other kind of motion in order to connect directly to that Auracast broadcast. So they're talking about both ways to do it with an assistant like a smartphone and ways to do it directly on the hearing aid. That does not depend on the Bluetooth folks. They don't make that decision. It is a decision that's made by the manufacturers of the hearing devices, or the manufacturers, for example, of a smartphone, what they're going to have on that. So Bluetooth does not oversee how manufacturers of devices implement their technology. So sometimes there's a bit of confusion about this, but much of this is going to be up to individual manufacturers and how they actually decide to have that interface for consumers to work. Finally, what's the timeline? When in the heck will this? We've been hearing about it for a while. I'm sure people are wondering when we might see Auracast come out. I believe it's going to be in 2023. I would guess probably around the time of the HLAA convention. And we're working. I'm working with those folks. I happen to work on the audio sharing project team with Bluetooth, but we're in discussions about having some additional demonstrations of Auracast and LE audio at the convention. We don't have anything set yet. We have no details at all about this, but we're definitely talking with them about the possibilities for the convention. So I'm hoping there will be some additional demonstrations if you happen to go to the HLAA convention that you could try there. Now I'm going to take some questions. We have about 10 minutes.
So Linda,
Yep.
this is Lisa. There are questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them, or you want people to raise their hand, whoever asked those questions? How would you like to do that?
I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually look at the questions. Okay. 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 Would I recommend a ceiling installation of a loop system versus on the floor? This is from Joe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This very much depends on the venue. So I don't think there's a one size fits all for that kind of question. And that's why an installer is so important for getting a recommendation. They should be able to know how and where to make that installation. And that's not something I would feel like I'm capable of doing. And certainly an installer wouldn't make that recommendation without seeing the actual physical space. Okay, I'm just looking through the questions. I think that's all the questions. There is some conversation back and forth, but if I've missed anything and anyone has a question, please let me know. Just go ahead and raise your hand. And Wendy.
Hi, I'm curious about AutoCast. Are there any local companies that are specializing in installation of AutoCast equipment in venues, or not yet?
I don't think we know that yet because we don't actually have the equipment for installation at this moment.
Okay.
It's in development. It's just not out there for.
So it's like a proof of concept thing. It's not really any actual people doing the work of making us specifications on what's required for equipment.
No, all of that's being done. What I'm saying is there are no manufacturers that have yet to offer that for sale. They're definitely producing these things, but and my expectation is that the very same assistive listening people are installers of assistive listening devices are going to be installers of Auracast as well. And in fact, I believe that you will see some systems combined. So they might be able to have a system that utilizes both a loop and Auracast simultaneously. That's not unusual because you can find systems now where there are two transmission methods within the same system. But that's my expectation, that the people who are doing assistive listening installations now will add Auracast to their portfolio, if you will.
Linda, if I could just interject, wouldn't it also be people who are installing public address systems? So it's audio as well as assisted listening.
I think you have a good point, Lisa, because this idea of Auracast is not siloed. It's not specific to people with hearing loss. It's really for everyone and to use in all kinds of places. So while assistive listening vendors will likely do installations, my expectation is that the people who will do installations will go beyond that and be much broader. So thank you. Good point. Lisa Yoon.
Yeah, I have a fairly new iPhone, an iPhone 13, and I was seeing your diagram up on the screen, and mine doesn't have Auracast, and I see it as an app. So how do you get it on the iPhone?
Right. So your no phone at the moment will advertise that it has Auracast. That's what it will look like when that becomes available. It is not yet available. However, Apple has committed and Samsung has committed through Google that they are going to be utilizing LE Audio and Auracast. So I fully expect that the next generation phones will do that. Some of that will be done just through like an update on your phone, depending on how old your phone is and what the components are inside of it. Other situations will mean that if you want to utilize that technology, you would have to buy a new phone.
I also have another question. I have new Phonak hearing aids, and I just looked at the app and I did not see a telecoil choice. And I've been traveling back and forth to Europe, going through Frankfurt and Vienna, and I can never hear the announcements. I'm always asking people, what did they say? Are they boarding? Is it possible a new hearing aid doesn't have telecoil? I mean, I'll call my audiologist, but.
Is it possible? It absolutely is possible. Probably around, I would say about half of hearing aids come with telecoil. So about half the hearing aids on the market actually come with telecoil. So it's possible that you could get a new hearing aid that does not have telecoil, or that it might have the telecoil in it. It just hasn't been enabled yet.
Thank you.
So I would add, you should go back to your audiologist and find out if it's been enabled.
Yeah.
Because if they had not specifically asked, they may not do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa Yoon, who's on the phone, I think.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. So if I'm understanding correctly, and I'm sorry, this is a dumb question, but in order to use the Auracast Bluetooth, it would require that the venue has it, your
Yes.
hearing device, and
Yes.
your phone?
Correct. So the venue has to have it because remember, there are 3 pieces to any assistive listening. So you have to be able to capture the sound somehow and transmit it. So
Right.
if the venue is where the transmitter would be, that's the place where you're going to see that transmission happening. What you have is just the ability to pick up whatever transmission might be available at a particular venue.
Okay, and then you would need it on your phone to choose,
It
select
will-
the venue,
So
and then you'd need it in your hearing device as well to connect to your hearing devices?
it's going to depend on the hearing aid or hearing device manufacturer. Some of them, and there's been a lot of talk about this, so my expectation is it will happen, that some hearing aids you'll be able to just like push a button or flip a switch on your hearing aid, not on your phone, but you're doing it directly through your hearing aid so that you push the button and you hear the Auracast broadcast. You don't
Okay.
have to go through your phone. However, there may be some hearing aids that only allow you to select the broadcast on your phone. But once again, the broadcast is still going from the transmitter, the Auracast transmitter, directly to your hearing aid. The phone just lets you select which
Right, okay.
transmission you're listening to.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Judy. Go ahead, Judy. Judy Alden.
Following up on Lisa's question, and this has been a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Linda.
Sure.
I would say it's clear now, but parts are clear and parts in the future are still muddied. So as the consumer, of this new technology, audio Auracast,
Yes,
I have to have a compatible hearing aid.
correct.
This is a question. And I have to have a compatible smartphone. And
Possibly.
the venue has to be equipped to offer Auracast.
Yes. Yes. The only thing I would say is absolutely your hearing aid has to have it. Absolutely the venue has to offer it. And the smartphone piece is a question mark. It's going to depend on how that particular hearing aid manufacturer decides to implement things. Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Andrea. Oh, we can't hear you, Andrea. I think you're muted.
Hi, Linda.
Hey.
Sorry about that. Thank you. This was a great presentation.
Good.
Do you know if the current version of Bluetooth, like 5.2, might possibly work with Auracast in the future?
So yes, 5.2 should work. We're now up to like 5.3. The question mark is really how, for example, hearing aid manufacturers might handle whether or not they enable that. So let's say you have version 5.0 in your hearing aid, maybe, and it, you have a chipset in there that could be updated, maybe even over the air. Whether or not the manufacturer chooses to permit that is another question. So 5.2 is the version you must have, or higher. Now we have 5.3, but that's the version you must have in order to be able to make use of LE audio. And that's the core specification that permits the hearing access profile that permits Auracast use. How manufacturers are going to allow for updating that, if in fact the chipset inside the device can handle it, is a completely other matter.
Let me hold here. We have, according to my clock, we're up against the hour here. It's 12 o'clock. We can switch. We have a captioner. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Yes,
You've done a
thank
wonderful
you.
job. If you need to leave, we can switch for people who want to continue to ask again. If Linda can stay on a little bit, we can switch to automatic captioning. Is that? The captioner is saying she can stay on. Thank you,
Oh.
Joe. We appreciate it.
Thank
So
you.
a couple more minutes. I don't want to abuse this, but if I know that Vi has a question. Go ahead, Vi.
No, actually, it's me. It's Ted. I mean, this AutoCast sounds great, but it sounds like it's a prototype. And the whole idea is that everybody has to be on board. So to me, this is 5 to 10 years away from actually being a real thing.
No, I would disagree with that. It's going to be out before that. As I said, I expect it to be out in the new year, not maybe in January, but sometime in 2023.
But
Now, things are not going to be deployed 100% everywhere all at once. Just like any new technology that comes out, it will happen over time. So how much you see it, how widely it's deployed, is kind of a different question than whether or not it will actually be deployed in some places. I fully expect it. The one thing I will say is you have to remember that this has been being worked on for on the order of almost 10 years. And there has been a tremendous effort on the part of hearing device manufacturers, on the part of assistive listening folks, on the part of big manufacturers, like I mentioned, Apple, Google, and they are working together and are on board. So and the Bluetooth group has been marketing this like crazy, as you all know. My expectation is they want to push this forward as quickly as possible. And I do believe you will see some deployments in 2023. The rate at which you will see that out in the world, out in the wild, is a different question. And if it's anything like other Bluetooth, it will happen fast.
Okay.
That'd be
Let me
good.
just add this to that. We also know things like computers are putting in the same kind of technology. Now for a computer, again, is you still don't have a hearing aid, but you might be able to get a headset that you can use with your hearing aid that will receive the signal. Televisions, I mean, there's all kinds of applications that we're talking about. We're not just talking wide area. There's lots of different possibilities for this. So, and yeah, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen with a flip of a switch. In
And
addition, as Linda also said, we'll still see loops, we'll still see other systems out there at the
Yeah.
same time.
the other thing is that when you look at forecasts that Bluetooth has put together, they're going to have the devices that support Bluetooth Classic are going to diminish. The devices that support classic Bluetooth and this new LE audio are going to increase over time. Then it's going to start decreasing in favor of LE audio only. I can tell you their goal, without a doubt, no question at all, is that they want to move everything to Bluetooth LE audio. I think they're expecting something on the order in 5 years of 3 billion devices being shipped with this capability. That's a lot. So I don't want to minimize this idea that there are prototypes out there. Certainly devices are coming on board, and I'm hoping maybe you'll be at the convention, and I'm hoping, since I'm in discussions with them about this, that there will be some demonstrations that you can take advantage of and sort of see how this works. Who knows about the timeline? We never really know. And industry certainly never tells us the specifics about their timelines. That's something they keep close to the vest. They don't reveal it. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that we'll have some very interesting things that you can try out at the convention. But don't hold me to that, because
Hopefully it works.
Yeah, we're hoping to be there.
yes, going to keep our fingers crossed that we might be able to get to that. Heidi?
The other thing that I think is so excited about Oracast and why it will catch on like wildfire is because it's invisible and it equalizes everybody. And it is going to be adopted like crazy by people with normal hearing. And so they're jealous of us because we have the Bluetooth streaming with our smartphones, and now they're going to get it too. And I think that they're really going to be able to push and demand it to be installed so that the restaurants can turn down the damn music, or you could go to the restaurant and pick your own music, or go to a sports bar or a gym and pick your own television. So I think what's so attractive about it is that the mainstream people with hearing are going to demand it everywhere. And we get the benefit of, we get to mainstream and we no longer have to say, oh, I'm special or I need an accommodation. It's everybody gets the accommodation, whether they want to admit or not that they have a hearing issue. So I think it's a real leveler for everybody in the community. And I think the demand for it's going to be huge among our hearing friend as well as us.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better. That's absolutely right. That is the hope, the promise of it. We'll see if in the end that is what materializes, but I certainly hope so, because you really hit the nail on the head as to why this feels like such an important game-changing technology. And that is that it's not siloed. It's not something just specifically for people with hearing loss. The idea is it's for everyone. That means venues are going to want to implement it more. It's going to be better maintained. All of those things we talked about in that one slide, where what do consumers want and need, and venues as well. I think it has the potential to address those. We'll see, proof's in the pudding. Once it's out there, we'll see what happens, but it certainly seems like it has the potential. Lisa?
I have a selfish question, a technology question. I've been going overseas, and I'm in a country where everything on TV that my friend watches is in English, but he watches with subtitles in his language that I don't know. And is there a device that would work in European current, the 240, 220, 240, that I could buy and plug in so I might better decipher the English? Because I can't decipher English on TV without captions. I mean, I'm caption dependent. Does
So-
anyone know of
so-
something I could use?
So are you asking for something that you could, for example, a transmitter you could hook to the TV that transmits the TV audio directly to your hearing aid, and your
or
hearing aid is the receiver? Yeah.
take the-
Yeah, there's definitely that kind of technology out there. I again think this is a question for your audiologist, since she would know the kind of hearing aids you have and the kind of accessories that the manufacturer offers. But there are definitely things that you could investigate that I would suggest you bring it up for sure with your audiologist, in addition to the telecoil question.
I have Bose in-ear headphone ear pieces, and I took them on the plane the last time. Take the hearing aids out, put those in, and I was astonished at how I could watch movies. I mean, I
Yeah.
really thought my loss was so great I would not be able to. So I'm just wondering something that would help me with TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
thanks for the suggestion.
Yes.
Pat has his hand up.
I'm sorry.
All right, this is just one more
Oh, Ted.
question on the idea. My church is actually considering right now, they're actually fundraising towards a Wi-Fi system. Should they wait?
I think that we don't know what's going to happen with the deployment of Oracast. I think you should never wait for accessibility.
Okay.
You need to have it now. Other people need to have it now. One thing I would suggest is if you can at all get a demo of that system, so that you can evaluate whether you feel like there are any latency issues. It's something that has come up with Wi-Fi systems in terms of anecdotally people reporting that to us. So I think it's always important to just check it out and make sure that it's sounding the way you want it to. And if in fact it doesn't perform, particularly around latency, you have a way to make a change. So
It's difficult to say because we came into the demonstration at the convention by, I guess,
yes,
by Sennheiser, who was doing it.
yes, yes,
And everybody there was saying that it all came through to them quickly and
yes.
there was no latency issue. But I don't know what that would be like. The church itself is
Translating it,
small.
yeah.
And so I don't know. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned Williams is the manufacturer of the actual Wi-Fi system, Sennheiser, or is it
It
Williams?
was, ours was Sennheiser.
Right, but the church, I thought you
The
had said
church
it.
is a Lutheran church.
Whether it's Williams is the manufacturer or no?
This is Wendy.
okay.
I mentioned Williams.
I think that
Todd
was
did
Wendy
not.
that mentioned
So
Okay, I think I may have misunderstood who was.
Different
that
church.
was. But yeah, but I would say if you can get some sort of demonstration of that system, specifically ask about latency. And if you find that they say it's not going to be a problem, but you experience it, that there's some way that you can address that, then yeah. But
Okay.
don't wait for accessibility. Get it
Okay.
now.
Thank you.
And in the future, they may be able to add on something, who knows? There may be an add-on for the Bluetooth that would be relatively inexpensive. And in fact, one of the advantages but Bluetooth has said about utilizing Bluetooth technology is that it will be relatively low cost. And so it may not be difficult to either add it on at a later time and may not be very costly either. It's hard to say, but that's something we've heard.
So I don't want to take too much more time because Joe has been kind about extending her cart here. So I want to make sure that she gets the rest of her day back.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, especially the new people who came from far away. I know some people came from out of state. We appreciate your being here. You're welcome to be at any of our others. Next month, we're going to have a holiday celebration virtually, and Vi is going to help moderate that. So we welcome everybody back, even if you're from out of state. It's going to be our regular third Saturday of the month at 10 in the morning. And thank you very much to Linda Kozma-Spytek, who came and spent her Saturday with us and explaining some of these things. It was wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm so glad.
And thank you also to the captioner. And thank you to all. Have a great rest of your weekend and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Okay. Bye-bye all.